Hi, I'm Roxy Keller, and this is Baking with Roxy. Today I'm doing a special bake called a Dubai chocolate cake. Now, this is not part of the Great British Baking Show challenges, so it's a side bake. I'll probably mix these in every once in a while when I have a reason to want to do something other than the Great British Baking Show challenges. So I had never heard of Dubai chocolate until about a week ago, and I was looking online at a newsletter that I get from Bake from Scratch magazine. I have a subscription to Bake from Scratch magazine, and I've mentioned this magazine before. It's one of my favorite in part because there is a photograph for every single recipe, which I love. They even have things like piping tips, and they always are trying new recipes. So they have a whole team, of course. I guess all of these food magazines do. They have a team of people who are trying new recipes. And in addition to their magazine, at the end of every year, they publish all of the recipes from that year in a book, in a volume. And if you've seen other episodes, I have done other things from different volumes because I have a few of those year-long volumes. And another thing I love about it is the original chef, Brian Hart Hoffman, is from the South. I'm from the South, so a lot of the bakes tend to have that warm sort of southern flair to it. Now, this Dubai chocolate cake is quite different. So Dubai chocolate, I thought maybe it was a special type of chocolate like Hershey's or Nestle or Cadbury's or Ghirardelli or whatever. But it's actually a chocolate bar. So a Dubai chocolate bar is a chocolate bar with a filling made from pistachios, like ground up pistachios, and then a really cool ingredient that you may never have heard of. Again, something I'd never heard of. It is a product called katafi, and it is shredded phyllo dough. That's crazy. So you know the super thin phyllo dough that people use to make baklava and tons of other types of pastries. Baklava is probably my favorite, which is why that one comes to mind. But it's shredded, dried baklava. So it adds a crunchy texture to your filling. So picture a paste made of the green pistachios along with this and some other flavorings. So it is a chocolate cake, 2-layer, 8-inch round chocolate cake made with Dutch process cocoa. And other than that, it's pretty typical chocolate cake where you add a little coffee to bloom the cocoa. And then there's a chocolate buttercream frosting, and then this pistachio paste has to set, and it will be the filling for the cake. So I'm excited to give it a try, and I hope you will too. Let me know if you do, and we'll compare. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to start by making the pistachio filling, and so I have some raw pistachios, and mowing is going on. It calls for 222 grams or 1.5 cups of roasted, unsalted pistachios. These are unsalted, but they're not roasted. So I have the oven preheating to 350 degrees. I'm going to put these pistachios in the 350-degree oven for about 6 to 7 minutes. I'll know they're done when I pull them out and start to smell the nuttiness. The other ingredients for the pistachio filling will start over on the stovetop. So I'm going to go over there and start mixing those ingredients, including the katafi. It needs to be toasted. And then there are also sesame seeds, white sesame seeds. And it doesn't say to toast them, but I think I'm going to toast them in a little skillet just a little bit, give them an extra nutty flavor. Okay, I'm starting with 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds. I'm just going to toast those for a few minutes on medium high. Starting to get a little brown. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. I don't want them to brown anymore, so I'm going to put them in a cool bowl. Okay, now to continue making the Katafi filling, I need 3 tablespoons or 42 grams of butter. Once this is melted, I'll add the shredded katafi. Now, the recipe calls for 8 ounces or 227 grams of frozen katafi or katafi that has been thawed and roughly chopped. Now, I don't know how much water the frozen kind would have, but obviously that weight would include a little bit of water. I only have shredded dried katafi. It's not frozen, so, and there's no water in it. I'm just going to take a guess and put in about half, so a little over half. I'm putting in 130 grams of dried shredded katafi. Now I just need to stir that around until it's golden brown. It's a little bit unwieldy. It comes out of the pan. But I can't imagine it would take long for it to get a little bit golden brown. Prior to starting this, I put a piece of parchment paper into a baking sheet because once this is golden brown, I'm going to pour this out onto that baking sheet while I prepare the rest of the filling. The browning is supposed to take 12 to 15 minutes. I forgot to mention that the reason I got excited about doing this Dubai cake was not because this recipe appeared in Bake from Scratch magazine, but rather because they have a weekly Zoom school where you can watch them or learn how to do different recipes. And last Monday was the demonstration on the Dubai chocolate cake. So apparently, and this was my first time joining the class, I'll probably do it again because it was fun. Apparently, they have a competition where people in the class will try making whatever item it is that they teach you how to make. And I guess they, put all the names of the people who post pictures. They put all the names in a hat and draw out and have a winner. So I thought I could do that and potentially be in their competition. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully this goes well and I can send them a picture. think we're almost there. Okay, I'm going to call that done. It's been about 11 or 12 minutes, so I'm now going to pour this out onto the baking sheet. Okay, here's my golden katapi, and I'm pouring it out so that it can cool completely before I put it in with the rest of the ingredients. Makes a little bit of a mess. Maybe I should have used a larger skillet, but not too bad. Just a few pieces jumped out. Okay, gonna let that cool. Now I'm going back to the stovetop to make the rest of the filling. Now I'm gonna make the slurry that the filling is made of. And so I'm gonna start with a cup or 220 grams of granulated sugar, a quarter cup of water, and this is water plus 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. So basically, I'm going to make a caramel, which means once this starts to boil, I don't want to put anything in the saucepan or it will crystallize. I want to make sure that there isn't any sugar up on the edges because that can induce crystallization. I want the sugar to melt and the temperature to increase until it reaches 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And I have a candy thermometer, but I don't really trust it. So I'm going to use my instant read thermometer. And when it gets to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to remove it from the stove, add the pistachios that I already weighed out and toasted, the sesame seed, and the baking soda and salt. So it calls for half a teaspoon of salt, but since I use salted butter, I did slightly less than half a teaspoon. So one thing I learned about making caramel is that one of the reasons why it crystallizes and you have to start over is not because you're stirring necessarily, it's because you've stuck a foreign object into the mixture, and that's what basically starts the crystallization. So like I said, once it starts boiling, I'm not going to stir it anymore. It's getting pretty close. The edges are starting to bubble a little bit. It says that you can disturb it by like swirling it around, but just don't stick anything in there. Now, I don't know why it's okay to have your candy thermometer in there, but apparently it is. It is turning a little bit golden. Let's see what the temperature is. $225, so got a little ways to go. In preparation for this, I have another baking sheet that I've covered with aluminum foil and sprayed it with a little bit of baking spray. Every time I do this, I think it's never going to get there, but it always does. 172. I just have to make sure not to touch the bottom of the saucepan with my thermometer because that would be an incorrect measurement. Oh, we're there. All right. Okay, now I need to quickly add in the pistachios, the sesame seeds, baking soda and salt, and stir. Now spread this on the foil on the baking sheet before it sets up. Basically, we want it to be as thin as possible, so basically pistachio thickness. It says to spread it with a heat-proof spatula. That's what this is, but it's kind of difficult. It wasn't too easy for them on the show either, so they didn't get it spread all the way out either. It kind of looked like this. After this cools, we're going to put it in the food processor and process it down to almost like a pistachio butter, pistachio brittle butter, and then add some cream, add the katafi. So it doesn't really matter if you get it in a single sheet, it just helps it cool more quickly if you do. While that is cooling, I'll start making the cake. While the pistachio brittle is cooling, I'm going to start making the chocolate cake. And so I have the oven preheating to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I have two 8-inch round baking pans. I'm going to use parchment paper, so I have some pre-cut 8-inch rounds. I'm going to spray this with baking spray, and then the first part of making the cake batter will start over on the stove, and that's because we'll heat up the chocolate with the butter and a few other ingredients, and then I'll mix it together with the dry ingredients. For the chocolate cake, I'm starting on the stove top with a medium saucepan over medium heat and 1 stick of salted butter. That's 113 grams. Once this is melted, I'll whisk in the cocoa butter. Now, I'm going to use Dutch processed cocoa butter, which is what the recipe calls for. And I recently learned, I've always used either Nestle or Hershey's 100% cocoa powder, unsweetened. And I've also used Hershey's Special Dark. I recently learned that the Special Dark is actually Dutch processed. So that's not actually the brand I'm using today because I didn't realize that when I bought my Dutch processed cocoa. I'm using Ghirardelli 100% Dutch processed cocoa. That's melted, so I'm going to whisk in the cocoa powder. It says to cook until fragrant, about 1 minute. Okay, that's been a minute. Okay, I have my cocoa and butter off the heat. Now I need to add 1 3/4 cup of packed dark brown sugar, or 385 grams. 385 grams of dark brown sugar. Next, it calls for 1 cup of hot brewed coffee. I don't drink coffee, so we don't have any coffee. I have espresso powder. So I mixed 2 tablespoons of espresso powder with 1 cup of hot water. One cup of hot brewed coffee. Now I need the whisk again. That sugar needs to melt or dissolve. 3/4 cup of buttermilk, but since I don't have buttermilk, I used 3/4 cup whole milk plus slightly less than 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Going in next are 2 eggs that have been slightly beaten, and the temperature is gone way down, so I'm not going to worry about the eggs curdling. I mean, I'm going to mix them in, but shouldn't have any issues with scrambled eggs. Finally, for the wet ingredients, I need 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. I'll mix together the dry ingredients in another bowl. 188 grams of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. It calls for 1/2 teaspoon of salt, but since I used salted butter, I'm just going to use 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Whisk the dry ingredients. It says to add the dry ingredients to the wet, but since this bowl is a lot smaller than this one, I'm going to add the wet to the dry. It does say to whisk, and since this is a pretty liquidy dough, whisking makes a lot of sense. So, relative to the amount of liquids, there was not a lot of flour. It's pretty typical of chocolate cakes, though. It says mix just until combined because we don't want to start developing the gluten. Okay. Now I need to divide the batter among the bowls. And when she made it on Monday, she had about 300 grams per baking pan. And the recipe says that your batter should weigh about 685, but hers was only about 640. So I'm going to start with 300, and if I need to add more, I will. Okay. Stir this good before I start pouring. Make sure there's nothing on the bottom that's going to be missed. Well, there's exactly how. Well, there's 334. I went a little overboard, but let's hope that it really does weigh about 685. We'll see. 6 grams difference between the 2 pans. That's why you can't just... Wow, I have a lot more. So that's... Okay, this one has a lot more. So this is 409. So 409 minus 334 is 75. So I need to add 75 to this one. And I think I'll still have a lot more. Not sure why. Okay, that's 75, so they're even now. There's another 176. 205 minus 176. 30 more in this one, and then I'm just going to stop. Okay, that's 30. I just barely have a dribble left, so. Okay, at least they're even. And it says they'll take 40 to 45 minutes to bake, so I'll check them after 35 just to be sure and let you know when I'm finished. Into the oven. Okay, here is the pistachio brittle, and it's cool. I didn't have to put it in the freezer since I let it cool while I was making the cake. And now I'm supposed to break this up into pieces that go into the bowl of the food processor, and then it needs to process until it turns into a butter-like consistency. Because I sprayed this, it came right off. It says using a knife or your hands, you can trying to cut it just like that wasn't working out too well, so I just started banging it with like the end of the knife and still didn't get too many small pieces, but it's small enough to fit into the food processor. So now I'm gonna put this in the food processor. And pieces over here. I set aside about 30 grams of the brittle that I'm going to smash into really nice fine pieces. It'll be a nice decoration for the top. Again, I need to process this until it becomes a paste. It might take 4 to 6 minutes. It was blending like you saw, and then suddenly it just the particles inside the bowl sort of just stopped moving around because it's become kind of paste-like. I don't think it's smooth enough yet. It's only been a couple of minutes. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I mean, I guess I'd call that a dough-like paste. It's just that the chunks are bigger than I expected them to be. Okay, I'm going with it the way it is, so I need to add half a cup of heavy whipping cream. One-third cup or 40 grams of powdered sugar. Finally, a quarter cup or 57 grams of melted butter. Ooh, that smells good. It's a nice gooey paste now. And that's good because we're going to stir in the shredded katafi, or katafi, which is shredded in and of itself. I'm going to mix this one more time and then we'll blend that with the katafi. Forgot one more thing is that I need to add a little bit of food coloring. I have green food coloring, and you don't have to add that, but when they were doing it on the show, on the Zoom school, they showed the pistachio filling with and without the food coloring, and the one with just looks so much better. So I have AmeriColor Leaf Green. Just going to try a little bit with two drops and see how that looks. Let's check the cakes. Okay, it needs just a couple more minutes, the cake. I'm going to see if I can get the stuff up from the bottom, because the bottom stuff doesn't seem to be getting green. And I'm adding one more drop of food coloring. Sometimes those gel food colorings are more jelly and sometimes they're more liquidy. Just never know. Okay, so the cakes are done. I stuck a toothpick in and they came out with just a few moist crumbs on them, but no liquidy cake batter, so I'll let those cool. I have another 8-inch round cake pan that I am lining with plastic wrap. So now I'm going to put the paste, pistachio paste, into this large bowl and then stir in the Katafi filling. There's my pistachio paste. Now, Katafi. Well, this was the moment of truth to see if I used the right amount of Katafi, since I had the dried instead of the frozen, and this looks a lot like theirs did, so I feel pretty good about it. Because I remember watching them on the show and thinking, wow, I thought that dough, that Katafi, would be more like mixed in, but it's very obvious. Now that needs to go in here. And press it down. Okay, that goes in the refrigerator for 1 hour. It's been about 10 minutes, and so it says to go ahead and turn these out and let them sit on the cooling rack outside the pans to cool completely. So, come right out. And they just have my handprint on them. Okay, let those cool completely. While the cakes are cooling and the Katafi pistachio paste is setting, I'm going to make the chocolate buttercream frosting. I'm going to start with 284 grams of butter. It says half a teaspoon of salt, but since I used salted butter, I'm not going to add any salt. I'm going to beat the butter until smooth. Into a second large bowl, I'll sift in 390 grams of confectioner's or powdered sugar, and 50 grams of Dutch processed cocoa powder. Whisk this together. With the mixer on low, I'll add the sugar. Alternately with the sugar cocoa mixture, I need to add 3 tablespoons of heavy whipped cream. Finally, 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. Okay, that is whipped up quite nicely and it's delicious. I don't know if it's the Dutch processed cocoa or if it's just because it's chocolate frosting, but it's delicious. The instructions say to use immediately, but my pistachio still needs to set for about half an hour, so it'll be fine. I don't know why it would have to be used immediately. Yeah, so I'm going to put this in. I guess I'll put it in the refrigerator and then take it out just before I start assembling the cake. Let it warm back up a little bit. I thought as I went along that it was going to be so thick that I'd need to add some extra milk, but it is a very nice consistency, very smooth. I'll be back. Okay, I am ready to assemble this cake and frost it, and I want to have it on this display board, but it's easiest to ice it when it's on a turntable. So I have a piece of shipping tape there just to keep this in place while I turn the table. And because I put equal amounts of batter into my pans and use the same type of 8-inch round cake pan, they are very close to the same thickness, if not exactly the same. So I'm going to start with one of these, place it in the center. Here's my taffy pistachio paste filling. And my other cake layer. Okay, so that is the assembled layers and filling, and this is pretty much exactly how it looked on the Bake from Scratch course. And I've been frosting cakes for about 40 years, and I really learned something about frosting cakes. And that is the way she did it was she frosted the top and got it real smooth with lots of additional hangover on the edge. And then she iced around the edges, and she did not skimp at all with putting really thick frosting around the circumference of the cake. And then you can see how the frosting, the filling might even stick out a little bit, but you put so much frosting on it that you're supposed to end up with a nice straight-sided cake. So hopefully I can do that as well. with an offset spatula. Spread that around. Well, I don't quite have it hanging over quite as much as she did, but we'll see how it goes when I add the sides. And of course, I've always reached over the cake like this, but she made it very clear that if you're right-handed, you reach over the cake and frost the sides. You don't try to frost the side that's your dominant side. And yeah, for sure, I wouldn't want to try to ice on the other side. One of the reasons I kind of skimped on the top, I guess, is I'm always afraid I'm going to run out, and I never do. So. I'm going to use this bench scraper to get the edges straight. You can see where you might have missed a little bit. She had the same thing, so. See, awkward to be on this side, but just a little bit's okay. This is probably the edge where I didn't have enough at the top. Looks a little thin. And she did something like this. Okay, so by using that bench scraper around the edge, I got rid of most of the chocolate that had fallen on the board, but I want to get rid of all of it, so I'll take a ever so slightly wet paper towel, use my offset spatula, and clean out the edges. That edge at the bottom won't matter if you have a border that you put on the bottom, but this particular cake doesn't really have one. But the nice part is we don't have to have the top absolutely perfect. We want it square, but it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth because we're going to add a chocolate ganache on the top and have it drip down the sides just a little bit, and then top it with that crushed pistachio brittle topping. So to make the chocolate ganache, I need 175 grams or 6 ounces of 60% semi-sweet dark chocolate, which is exactly what Nestle semi-sweet morsels are. So I need 175 grams. It says to heat the cream in a saucepan, but I'm just going to do it a few seconds in the microwave until it's warm. My cream is steaming, so I'll pour it over the chocolate. Let that sit for about a minute. Okay, now I'll stir that until it's mixed. Put the chocolate ganache in a pastry bag. Okay, so I'm going to cut a small hole and then add some chocolate so that it just starts to drip over the side. Right, the rest goes in the middle. So I can make a little bit bigger hole and just let it go. Few bubbles in there, but I know she had them too. I don't know if she talked about a way to get rid of them or just didn't worry about it. So finally, I crushed my 30 grams of pistachio brittle with a mallet. Just going to put a little bit around the edge. And voila. I don't know how to say that in whatever language they speak in Dubai. But here it is, the Dubai chocolate cake. And now it's time to make dinner. Maybe after dinner I'll come back and take a slice, give it a try. Thank you for joining me. And if you enjoy At Baking with Roxy, please subscribe, and I'll see you later. Okay, well, we had dinner, so time to try the Dubai chocolate cake. That center is a bit difficult to cut through, but
point first.
Here it is. Oh, it looked better on the other side, actually.
You can always spin the cake and show them the inside. It smells really good. It smells very chocolatey, like almost like a German chocolate cake. Let's try some of just out of chocolate first. Very good, very moist.
What happened to the bottom layer? Did it get smushed? I wonder if it kind of got smushed by that.
I don't know, but I'm going to try some. Oh, that pistachio, that center kind of set up.
That's a big bite.
I'm a big guy. The filling, the pistachio brittle filling is very crunchy. You definitely taste it as soon as you put it in your mouth, and it's delicious. You see what I'd like to have this in Dubai. Some icing.
That is really good.
Very
That's
chocolatey.
definitely different. I mean, you taste the sesame seeds, probably because I toasted them a little bit, and you get the crunch of the katafi.
The crumb, as Paul would put it, is very good. Perfectly baked. And great chocolate flavor. So,
Yay!
get a Paul Hollywood handshake. So.
No, that's a Chauncey Keller handshake. Even better. Better in my world.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Thank you.